Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to take a look at Football Highlights 2052 by Mike Fitzgerald. Those of you who've been around a long time know that I hold in very high regard Baseball Highlights 2045, which was a game that really kind of jumped the charts to get to the top of my favorite sports games. Let's see if Football Highlights holds suit. Okay, let's go over what comes in Mike Fitzgerald's Football Highlights 2052. You have 4 different play cards, and these are formed end to end, backwards to each other. One side's on this side, one side's on that side. Each person has a ball starting at their has their ball, which starts on their opponent's side as they're attempting to get to the touchdown line here. As you make your way down with the ball, pretty simple stuff. There are sections for where you're playing your cards to activate anything you use, audibles, etc. There are 4 teams that come in the base box. You have Dallas, Philadelphia, New England, and San Francisco. Each of these has 5 all-star cards, which that have this particular pattern of a bunch of players, and then there's like ST something or other to signify it. And then, so 5 of those, and then 10 custom cards for each team that you can tell PD instead of ST and little stars. In addition to the 4 players, because this is very much a drafting game, you have a whole big lot of additional play cards that come from different teams, different names, meant to mess, and the names are changed to protect the less innocent. So anyway, and these will come into play as you're drafting cards. There are several different ways to draft, so there's no one particular flow through that. You also have these all-star cards, which can be used, and then you have play cards. During play, as you're playing stuff, there will be times when you'll be pulling an action card, and some of the reasons are because there was a penalty, because there's an injury check, or sometimes you'll get a little boost to runs or passes depending on how you play your card versus how your opponent does. There is a interesting scoreboard here, home and visitor. You can put the teams in that you're playing. Pretty clever concept. My last game, apparently I was up 12-0. And there is an AI. That's right. There's a full set of AI cards that you will use when you're playing against the AI. Other than that, there's also these teams, or these extra things, which can be used with baseball highlights too. So kind of a little value add there. And you get 2 play guides, which give you a shortened version of all the things you need to know. And you get, of course, the rule book. And there's some helpful Board Game Geek player aids for the flowchart for resolving how actions go. All right, let's get into gameplay. We're going to do a solo play, which there are only 2 subtle differences between solo and multiplayer, but ultimately solo is pretty simple. Shuffle the cards, take 10, put them into play. These are the 10 cards you're going to play per half on the solo AI's side. Also, each player is going to take 10 cards from their 15. They're going to shuffle, grab 10, choose 1 to be an audible card, and then draw back up to 10. And so we'll do that, or we've done that already. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and start by taking the first card and flipping it up. Look at that. Now, each card has the offensive side and the defensive side. And so when your opponent is playing an offensive card, you're going to play the defensive side of a card and try to thwart it. You're then going to flip that card, and you will be on the offense, and you will be trying to make gains, and the enemy player, the opponent, I guess is a better term, will be doing their thing instead. Now the key here, there are two different levels, tiers of checks. One of them is they call it a play match. Basically, there's 3 types of plays. There's a run, there's a pass, and then there's what's called a maul. A maul is basically a wild card. Run or pass, it's going to match it up with it anyway. So in this case, I have a run. I want to play a card, if I can, that's a run card, not a pass card. This particular team seems to do better against the run, but we will find out. So for example, this would be a bad card to play. If I played this, the pass and the run would not match, and my opponent is going to be able to basically take advantage of that with very minimal kickback. Instead, we're going to play this card. Why? because here's the thing. If the play matches, like you played a run card, I played a run card. Now that's step one in the defense's attempt to thwart that pass for 25 yards. What's going to happen now is you now check helmet checks. There's a left, middle, and right side of the field, and you're going to line it up. If your helmet matches up and blocks all of the different footballs, basically, in this case it does, one football and match, then instead of the offense getting to have their card, you do this instead. And you adjust this defensive thing, activates. It's a little tricky. Like I said, it's a two-tiered approach, but it becomes pretty natural after probably the first half of your first game. You'll kind of get into the flow of it. It flows much better than it seems. In this case, because it matches, we get to activate this card minus 15 to a minimum of 0. Now the quick snap was 25 yards. The minus 15 means 10 yards. That means my opponent goes from the 45 to the 35. Yay! And then he sets it here, because that's his first play of his drive. We flip it over, clutch 20. If this is play 3 or 4, which it is not, I can draw yardage, which means I can draw this and add to it. What's going to happen? The AI says, oh man, first off, pass matches pass. So, oh wait, what the heck? What the heck? I need to flip that over. Sorry, pass matches pass, and the helmets line up. So the AI is going to say, pick field goal. AI attempts field goal and offense resets. No audible. Wow. So I could attempt a field goal right now. The number's 2. I have to get a 7 to match 9 for a field goal to happen. It is 5. Close, but no cigar. And now I reset. What that means is if I was any closer to the goal line, I'd have to reset and start over. I don't get my 4 plays. So this is basically the flow of the game. Then, of course, flips over and says, hey, I want to play this. Now, if I were to play a run, say I were to do something stupid like this. No, actually, let's do something slightly less stupid. Okay. And, now let's do this. Yeah, there we go. In this case, because it's a mismatch, then you're gonna get these yards one way or another. You don't get the offensive drive because it's a mismatch, so even though they match up, you don't get the drive, but you do get to reduce the amount of yards for every helmet that matches in that particular place. So 35 minus 5 is 10, so less yardage, but it's a bad idea to have a mismatch. This is where the mall cards come in handy. You can also say, you know what, I'm gonna throw in my mall card, which in this case wouldn't do any good, but where it would, the mall card always matches. Mall cop. All right, so that's it basically. You're going to do this. You're going to go back and forth playing cards. If you ever get to a point where you want to, or you're on your 4th card, you can, if you're within the zone, attempt a field goal. And that is simply a matter, like we showed earlier, of saying, the last card played was a 2. If, say, the opponent was, say, here, you would need to draw 3 or more. 6. So that would be a next successful field goal. Also, if, and this is the case for the opponent, actually this is a case for the AI that's a little bit different, is that if you have a mismatch, let's get a mismatch going here. Yeah, let's do this mismatch right here. Haha. So if the AI were to choose to pass and it didn't match with the run, and the run, and there's no blockers here. This is for the solo game. Not only do they get that yardage, they get to flip it over and add to the yardage. That's what these cards are mostly for. So run after catch, 10 more yards. Yay! The rules are different for player versus player than player versus AI. It's a little more opportunity if you're playing against another opponent to be able to get that mismatch going on and be able to get the extra yardage. But in general, that's kind of how it goes. That's the general flow. This is not close to the amount of rules and variations. I think there are more variations than rules in this game, but that's the general flow of it. Again, you can play audibles. If you don't like a card you have, you can just set it there and flip it over and use your audible card. Also, if you are like, I don't have anything good, you could take a risk, take a blind card out of your deck and hope that it works. But generally that's the flow of the game, and you're gonna score your points in the halves. Then there's going to be a draft afterwards. Usually the draft consists of something like taking 2 cards out or passing passing them around. There's so many variants of drafting, but ultimately you'll start the second half with 15 cards again, using the various drafts. So that's it. Let's get to my final thoughts on Baseball Highlights 2052. Okay, final thoughts on Mike Fitzgerald's Football Highlights 2052. I gotta say that this game, we'll go over the cons first, then the pros and the summary. This game tried its darnest to make it hard for me to really get into the game. It really did, more so than its predecessor did. The rule book is haphazardly organized. Everything's there, but it seems to be kind of all over the map. In many ways, it's sort of like a pachinko ball bouncing between different possibilities of all the ways you could play it. It makes its way to the bottom. I mean, the rule book bounces between these many diffused options and around and around, and then it gets to the end. I mean, it's the same feeling that eventually, like a pachinko thing, I'll get there, but not optimally. And that's unfortunate, because the game is actually a lot smoother than the rules let on. The learning curve of this sort of makes players feel penalized by unnecessary roughness to the rules. When people are building flowcharts to try to figure out how to do it, that kind of says something about what is supposed to be a game about highlights. The two-tiered resolution took a while to get people into the flow of. Once you did, it was fine. But this is different enough than Baseball Highlights. And people, the petri dish of people I introduced Baseball Highlights to did not grok onto this nearly as much because of that hurdle. It's got this sort of flowchart. If you meet this big decision point, then go one of these two ways. But if you meet this decision point, but you have in some ways it's almost like a coin game. That can be an initial jarring point that made it harder for me to teach the game than I wanted to. The art is a major step down for me. The character artwork maintains that degree of style that's commensurate to the task, like Baseball Highlights was. The card itself is kind of an anti-pattern. You've got this 1990s sort of website with an unhealthy fascination for iframes with thick borders. You got rivets, and gridirony style was probably the intent. But simple things like, how do I find the 5-star players for each of the 4 teams? Well, they all have the same group picture, but that's not obvious. You can look at the card ID, and if it's ST dash in front of it, then that must be the star player. It's quirky. The field goal number is less pronounced than some of the basic not as essential information. Just the arrangement and the info is a big step down compared to Baseball Highlights 2045. The game board itself is okay. It services it okay. It's kind of this chopped off half slots for cards, football 50-yard guide. It's eventually people got it, like, I'm moving on your side, you're moving on my side kind of thing. They got it. I mean, it's the football scorecard, the scoreboard, the dial, that's a great idea. It was very stylish. It also was really difficult because the dials were so loose, and I tightened them up and I pushed them in. I did the steps, Bob, but it became like, if even jerking a little bit and they'd move, and I'm like, you know what? I'll just use dice. So I just used 2 dice and just kept score that way, because honestly, I get it though. I do appreciate the idea. That's the one part that I think was pretty stylish and great. Plus, they actually provided pieces for Baseball Highlights, so good on them. But overall, the entire presentation, just as an overall view, kind of lacks the continuity and cohesion I expect from a professional game. This is the kind of thing, as I looked at the parts and pieces, it's the kind of thing where in my business, I would say, okay, we prototyped this is awesome, we love the core gameplay. I'm going to hand this off, what I have now, off to the art team and say, okay, here's the mock-ups, now go make this awesome. Now go make this work, go do the UI pass, the UX flow, go do that. This sorely needed that UX pass, and it didn't get it. So those are the cons, and they seem legionous, but let's get into the pros. Baseball Highlights 2045, its predecessor, issued simulation for exclamation. By that I mean it removed the often drudgerous and monotonous parts of a particular game just so that it could go straight from highlight to highlight. And that's what made it so amazing and so easy and approachable to teach to people. I was looking for that in Football Highlights 22, and I definitely found it. I mean, when you get past it and you finally get into the rhythm and the flow of the game, you realize that it's got what you want in a football highlights game. It's got the back and forth. You've got this balancing act of your defensive choice versus your offensive choice. The just those just right amount of card play per game per half. The theme is it might be rough artistically, but it's sterlingly represented in gameplay. You got your starters, you got your core cards, you got your yardage numbers. They're variable, but they're sensible. The scores tend to stay in a generally feasible range. You've got some games that are low scoring, you've got some games that are high scoring, you got some blowouts, some not. Generally speaking, though, it measures up. It feels like football, and that's probably the best credo or kudos I could give to it. The field goal aspect is spot on. I like it. I like that it gives you that sort of guesstimate, okay, you got your choices. Halftime adjustments, exactly right. You have an opportunity at halftime to make some adjustment, but so does your opponent, so you never know what's going to happen. Audibles are fantastic. They're an fantastic in-game adjustment mechanism. They work the way I would hope they would work, with just enough scarcity and enough plentifulness to be just fit in well. The events, I think, are well handled. They're not, they give you some control. When I say the events, hey, you can get extra yardage and stuff. Some of them are, there's some control, there's some not. They never overwhelm the game so that you feel like the whole thing just became a random event crapshoot. Injuries are rare, for example, which is fine. You don't want them to happen all the time. That could get aggravating. Thematically, I do like the throwback style of play, in the same way that I liked the futuristic robot style of Baseball Highlights 2045. I do like the extensive drafting. I think that it makes it really, really important for a lot of variety in play styles. Even if you don't have any of the additional packs or whatever, this still gives you a lot of options. There's 4 teams, which seems like a small core, but once you add the drafting and the reconfiguring, it really balloons into a lot. So in summary, I have enjoyed all of Mike Fitzgerald's games in the past. The Baseball Highlights I mentioned. I mean, he's also Mystery Rummy. I don't think there's a Mystery Rummy I don't have. I bought them all, and they're fantastic. This reminds me kind of, I don't know if any of you dabble in video games and you ever get a game that's kind of not the best graphics and maybe a little buggy, maybe rough around the edges, but it's so fun that you intentionally just fight through it to get to that fun. That's kind of how I feel about Baseball Highlights, is that there's a kernel of fun there and it's worth your time. It's sort of like the Tortuga principle. I love Pirates of the Caribbean, the movie, and I always say that, fun, it's the type of fun that can only be found by those who already know where it is. And I really, really, really like the gameplay of Football Highlights 2052. I really do. It's about 90% of what Baseball Highlights 2045 did for baseball, and that's a lot. If they ever do sort of a deluxe edition, or if they ever do a different sport, basketball, hockey, I'm surely going to be in. The kicker is, if someone wants a football game, if someone wants a fun baseball game, the first thing I'm going to be out of my lips is Baseball Highlights 2045. If someone said, what's a fun football game? I have to tell you, this one's probably about 3 games back on the depth chart, just because of that initial hurdle. If I have a hardcore person who's like, yeah, I'm going to bowl through it, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out, it's a no-brainer. But I couldn't as easily just throw this at people and say, hey, go pick this up. I want to be there to help call the plays, to help them get into the game. So take that for what it's worth. But anyway, I think it's worth your time. If you get a chance to find this, it's... I got it pretty cheap, but it's definitely gone up in price, so hey, good value. But if you get a chance to check it out, Baseball Highlights 2045 is great, and Football Highlights 2052 is also worth your time. So take care, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.